There has never been a more important time to move in a vegan direction. Whether you're ready to start, restart, or re-energize your vegan or plant-based practice, this podcast is for you. I'm Michelle Olander, life coach, vegan, ADHD matriarch, travel lover, and smoothie loather. And I know that it's the details that get in the way of your vegan journey. But I like to believe that the obstacle is always the way. So every week we meet here where I translate the tools of life coaching and Stoic philosophy. I bring you actionable tips, some laughs, interesting guests, and vegan ideas for everyone at any age. All to help you veg your best. Episode 311, Installing Your Vegan Program. Hi kids, it's Michelle. It's episode 311. The 300Zs are flying, aren't they? And I've been preparing a talk for some people. But anyway, I thought I'd share kind of my rough draft for my talk and where we're at right at the moment. But the question for me to talk about is about willpower, discipline, and the vegan journey. And I thought it was really important. Some of you who have been listening since the beginning, you know how I feel. But I thought it can never be said enough that I don't think you have a willpower problem. And if you've been having trouble moving in a vegan or a plant-based or in any other direction that's important to you, I don't think it's a discipline problem or a follow-through problem or whatever synonym people like my clients and my listeners use to explain what's, quote, wrong with them. I really think that overwhelmingly there's nothing wrong with you. You are operating more or less impeccably based on your programming. The only problem I think you have or I have is what I consider a programming problem. That's why you can know exactly why you would like to limit or eliminate eating animal products. All the reasons, maybe it's for your health or for the animals or for the environment, for the planet, but you can't get yourself to do it consistently. And you know that the documentaries have given you a why, the books have told you what to eat, how to prepare plant-based meals nutritionally. But what you don't see, what you aren't taught, is why I do this work, and it's why I have this podcast. And it's because most of these things don't show you how to actually get yourself to do it, to live that way day after day without the feeling of fighting, efforting, working hard. And for most of us, it starts out the same way. You get fired up on something, you get all head up about what you want, and maybe you make an announcement, and you start pushing, and you push, and you read labels, and you say no to cheese, and you turn down what everyone else is having, and you start reading articles and subscribing to websites. And as long as you can stay super focused and motivated, and you've got some time, and you've got that energy, you do make progress. But you can't stay super focused and energetic forever because you've got a life. You've got a life to live. You have normal life stresses. Sometimes you have more abnormal life stresses. There are holidays. There are family dinners. Somebody gets sick. You get tired. And you and this effort you've been making, this metaphorical boulder that you've been proudly pushing uphill, well, that boulder rolls all the way back down over you to the bottom. Back to all the old decisions you made, all the old comfort foods, the takeout, the easy decisions, the cheese, the just this once, the bacon, whatever everybody else is ordering, it just kind of rolls back to the place of least resistance. And that's why what most people experience trying to go plant-based, that getting up, that getting fired up, that fighting and pushing and then rolling back down to the bottom, getting fired up again, fighting and pushing and then rolling back down to the bottom again. It happens enough times up and down that hill, and then, your thoughts tend to shift. Your thoughts about what's possible tend to shift. Your thoughts about who you are and what you're capable of tend to go down that hill with the boulder, and you start thinking, oh my gosh, what is the point? I'm just going to end up back here anyway. And you start to lose confidence in yourself. You start to lose confidence in the concept. And it's not because you don't care. You think about it a lot. You care about it a lot. You just, at some point, can't really do it again. Because you've decided in advance that you really kind of know how it's going to end up. And then you end up blaming yourself, maybe, like a lot of my clients, or you blame the season of life that you're in, or the people around you, or the local community and culture. And, mostly that's not your goal. It's not about being plant-based or vegan. It's not about who you are as a human being. It's really just your nervous system making sense of all that, having tried and failed too many times, and your brain trying to protect you from another letdown. But there's something a lot of us don't, I think sometimes a lot of us know it once we say it out loud, but a lot of us don't really realize, especially if you're the kind of person like many of my audience here, who pride yourselves on being intentional and thoughtful and educated and in the know. And those of us who are like that can be exquisitely attuned to what everybody else should be doing and how they're doing it wrong. But what a lot of us don't realize or appreciate is that boulder you're pushing uphill, that goal you're trying to accomplish, the steepness of the hill, the size of that boulder, and the amount of energy or power you can bring to the situation, those three things are controlled primarily by your subconscious programming. And when you change that programming, even a little bit, even if you just bring some awareness to the fact that you even have been programmed, you can pretty easily and much more effectively change your reality and your results. So, the Odyssey is in the news. I haven't seen it. My oldest grandchild, who is very into Greek myths, recently caught me making a mistake between Ajax and Atlas. Babsha, he said, I think you're confusing Atlas and Ajax. Okay, he was right. He's 6. He's right. So anyway, if we're into our Greek mythology, a lot of us may be aware of Sisyphus, that Sisyphus character pushing his boulder eternally up the hill, only for it to run back down over him and to have to start all over again. And my point is that with some awareness about the way our brains are programmed, the way our entire nervous systems are programmed, you can find that the hill will flatten a little bit. The boulder you've been pushing can get a little lighter, and your energy grows. Same person. The same person functioning in the same kitchen, in the same family, in the same community, in the same workplace can start to get different results. And that's what it can look like living plant-based without all the efforting and pushing and rolling back. So what is this about programming? You probably thought you've been fighting your cravings, the cheese, the burgers, that voice. Like I have a strong voice in my family that said that you need real protein, not that fake protein that animals seem to function on, but the real protein. That pull towards the foods you grew up on, those are just signs of your old programming, the programming of a lifelong, probably, meat and dairy eater. Most of us have been eating and thinking about nutrition and what food means the same way for many, many decades, and it's been reinforced in almost every convenience store and book and in markets and at restaurants and on TV or in social media. And for those of us who no longer struggle with a plant-based or vegan lifestyle, think about what part of life you do have as a struggle, what you have been efforting over or not making progress in. There are studies, like a famous one at the University of Southern California, that found about 43% of what you do, what I do every day, runs automatically, on autopilot, while your mind is somewhere else entirely. And honestly, for me, I think very often it's closer to 100% that just is running on autopilot. Because these are behaviors, decisions installed so deeply that they just run without you. And we've talked about that aspect of human behavior so many times here on this podcast. And a huge part of that automatic behavior, because it's a huge part of most of our days and our obligations to our fellow humans that we live with, is around food. What you reach for, what you order, what you put in your cart, how you build a plate. You don't remember most of it. You don't think about most of it because there's no decision. It just happens automatically, and that's a good example of your programming. And before you go plant-based, before you go vegan, it's set to the way basically you've always eaten. And that's why people who are, struggling, white-knuckling their way, going vegan on Monday, it doesn't work that well. It doesn't work that consistently. Yeah, it works for enough people that we think it should work for us, but we also don't see the details of other people's vegan journeys. We just see the results. So making a new rule about food is fine. It makes sense. It's part of it. But the rule, the new idea, what you've decided would be more healthful or more compassionate or more environmentally sustainable, does not override decades of habit. It fights against it. It tries to override everything with willpower and a lot of intentional thought, policing every choice every day, what to order, what to skip, what to say at work or lunch or at the family barbecue or at the restaurant where they've been used to making something for you in another way. And it can be tiring. It can actually be exhausting because food happens to be an obligation for us to deal with in some way throughout the day, every day, basically forever. And so, of course, you can hold on for a few days or for a week or a month, and sometimes much longer. But for many of us, for a lot of us, eventually the old programming wins, and all our struggle just rolls back downhill. And so many of you will recognize yourselves in this. That's why you can eat beautifully for 2 months. That's why suddenly one stressful day or one bad cold or one weekend trip somewhere brings back all the old comfort foods as if they never left, like eating muffins with buttermilk and eggs or cheese or chicken or fried clams or whatever. And then suddenly it's like those foods never left your lifestyle because in many ways they didn't. The program that made them feel natural, normal, and necessary was floating under the surface all the time. Now, I could talk about programming like it's abstract. It's actually not. It's actually not because it's physical. It's the way you are showing up in the world. It's what's behind your actions. And you can often see it running in your body. You can often notice it if you slow down for just a few seconds. If you can slow down the decision making when it's feeling kind of hard, when you're feeling a little uncomfortable, when you don't really know what to do, when you're wishing it was easier, when you're noticing you're pushing that boulder up the hill. And you might notice the tension. You might notice the tension, you might carry that in your shoulders. maybe tight. Maybe you didn't realize it until you just started thinking about it. Maybe your stomach, maybe your gut, maybe for me it's often a flushed face or a clenched jaw, speaking for myself. It can be your breathing, noticing that you're kind of holding your breath. All of those are signals of tension that are typically running when there is some kind of an argument between your programming and where you are right now, the stress program. And feeling all that stress, dealing with all that stress, this is the enemy of change, isn't it? When it's running, when your body wants the familiar, the things that we have used to self-soothe for decades, comfort foods, childhood foods. In some cases, we want the fastest hit of fat, salt, sugar, caffeine, whatever. Stress typically doesn't reach for lentils for most of us, especially in the beginning. Our stress reaches for whatever just seems easy, and very often it looks a lot like what it did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 40 years ago when we were young. But understanding that is not to make you feel hopeless, okay? It's to make you realize it's just natural. It's not a big deal. It doesn't mean anything's wrong with you or wrong with your idea or wrong with your solution. You just probably can't get rid of an old program. It's going to run there in the background. But just becoming aware of it can make all the difference. And then, once you're aware of it, you can look for potential ways to run a new program or a different program. Once you are aware that you've been running a program, watch how fast you can set up a slightly different one. Watch how fast, once you even notice that your shoulders are up around your ears, or you're breathing tightly or shallowly, or perhaps you notice that your jaw has been clenched. Drop your shoulders. You can intentionally move I just acted it out. You can kind of wiggle your jaw a little to relax your jaw. You can soften the muscles in your forehead. You can take a deep breath in, or a few. That's your intentional calm program. And you can do it in 4 seconds. You can do it in 8 seconds. You can do it for 60 seconds. You just became aware that you had a stress program running. And then you said, oh, I'm going to run a different program. And your body did the rest. And you can start to feel calmer. You can start to feel a little separated. You are not the program. So if you're able to feel that, just remember, you can give your body the right input and it will help do the rest. But calm is what you need for a very new program, like a plant-based program or a vegan program for most of us. And when calm is running, all that food noise gets quieter, the cravings ease, the choices you actually want to make get a little bit easier, even if you're the same person dealing with all the same people and jobs and house issues and chores. You're the same person, but you can replace, even for a few seconds, a program that was running. And that's reprogramming. You don't fight the previous program. You just replace it when and as you notice it. And listen, I know you do way harder things every day because you're smart and you're capable and you hold yourself to a very high standard. And if you listen to this podcast, I don't want to overgeneralize about you, but I'm going to guess that you're kind of an overthinker and maybe a perfectionist. And when something matters to you, you go all in. Or at least you want to. And that's how you've built the life you have. But maybe here with changing your diet, like moving towards a plant-based diet, maybe moving in a vegan direction, limiting and then eliminating the consumption of some or most animal products, you're feeling stuck. Or maybe you've been losing some patience with a friend or a loved one who's not making the plant-based progress that you feel they should have by now. I want you to know, I want to stress, this is not a you problem and it isn't a them problem. It's just programming. You weren't given the programs that actually work, how to think, how to live, and how to eat like someone who is naturally, comfortably plant-based. But those new programs can be installed. And if you know anybody who's plant-based or a vegan, you can see it. A lot of people have done it. It's not because they've got so much more willpower or so much more support or so much more anything. And I want you to know, most of us could have had this program the whole time. We just didn't know how to install it. And right from the beginning on this podcast, we've talked about how you can't, the foods most of us can't stop reaching for. That decision, that programming was built over a lifetime, and not by accident. Not by accident. The foods you don't know how to avoid or opt out of for decades. The meat and dairy industries have spent hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, I'm going to say probably billions actually, programming you. There have been slogans, milk does a body good, beef, it's what's for dinner, where's the protein? Those slogans have been installed in you since you were a child, most likely, and they're still running. And of course, it goes deeper than marketing. Processed foods, the cheese, the bacon, the fast food. These are all foods that have been engineered to be difficult, hopefully impossible to stop eating. Layers of fat, salt and sugar. They hit your brain's, reward system as hard as they possibly can. So if you ask yourself one thing, the industries that make money every time you eat animal products, do they want you to change? Do they want changing to be easy for you? Would they ever hand you the thing that ends their business model? No. So this was never about you being weak or undisciplined. You've been programmed. Deliberately in some cases, professionally in some cases, and from childhood by your family with only the best possible reasoning. That's what our families thought was the best for us. And the only option for change that people tend to talk about is willpower or discipline or follow through. But I don't think it's true that it's some character trait you or I are missing. If you've been listening a while, I never believed I could ever be vegan. My dad was a physician. My mom was a nurse. She was raised on a small farm with dairy cows. She believed deep in her bones, in an almost religious way, that milk was the perfect food. And that meant I was raised on a lot of dairy, eggs, loads of animal products, including, as you may have heard along the way, pickled pig's feet, another story. But on top of that, I also grew up in America on the standard American diet in the 60s and 70s when packaged convenience foods were everything. They were being marketed as modern and powerful. Wonder Bread was what would make me grow strong. Sugar, processed food, stuff that was engineered to be almost impossible to stop eating was part of my programming. But what changed for me along the way was actually, in many ways, how slowly I changed. I learned everything I could to support someone else on her vegan journey. It wasn't about me at all. I didn't even think it was possible for me. Bit by bit, I kind of learned to support her, what was pretty easy. And often I did more of that to help support her. I noticed what was impossible and I, punted that. I put that off until later. But slowly, workarounds began to suggest themselves in my brain that, I guess I could have done that, or I could have said it that way, or I could have looked at it another way. So I had started to see solutions because I didn't make it a big deal because it wasn't me that was trying to be vegan. Also, I started noticing the people who had actually made the changes and kept them, people who'd been happily plant based for many years. I didn't want their recipes particularly because I saw recipes were easy to find. I wanted their mindset. I wanted to learn how they thought about food and the questions they asked and how they handled problems and how they managed not to feel deprived in any way. And there's that famous Tony Robbins quote, success leaves clues. Watch people who've been able to do something and see what it is that they do. And the more of these people that I studied, the more I saw similar things running underneath. Not a lot of rules about what is vegan and what's not vegan or how to cook vegan or just the programming. The programming that different human beings were running. Long-term plant-based people aren't busy pushing that boulder uphill anymore. They're not resisting animal products. Most of them, like me now, I don't even see animals as food anymore. There's no fight, there's no push, there's no efforting because there's nothing to really fight about. And yes, I started to realize that there were affluent vegans who had loads of resources living in very vegan-friendly locations. But there were also, and they were very, very influential on me, vegan students making things work on a student budget in dorms with no real options, and also single parents trying to feed their families on very tight budgets, but still feeling happily, confidently vegan. Because when that programming changes, everything changes. Not just what's on your plate, but the whole experience of figuring out what's food, where you get your food, how you deal with food, how you talk about food. First, your choices start becoming automatic, and you stop negotiating with yourself. You stop forcing things. You stop thinking about how effortless it used to be before you had this crazy idea. And the plant-based choices just start to feel automatic. Just as automatic as the way your current choices do. And when that happens, a lot of the confusion, my coach used to say confusion is an example that you've got something going on that you need to investigate. Confusion is not really confusion. It's kind of saying, yeah, I just don't know. Maybe you know a little bit more than you think. Maybe you're not quite as confused as you think. But when that confusion ends, you start to know exactly how you want to eat, how you want to nourish yourself, and all that constant mental math that seemed so difficult. You go, oh, it got simple. It got simple. And then suddenly, one day, you're not someone who's trying to eat less meat. You're not trying to be vegan. You're not trying to be, quote, good. You're not on some diet. You're just living a plant-based practice the best you can, unapologetically, and it feels very natural because it is. And you've seen that your programming has been reinstalled. It's just who you are. And that's what changing your program actually gives you. It's not a restriction that you get through, that you effort, that you push uphill. It's actually just being done with making a problem out of any of it. You're done with fighting cravings. You're done with starting over every Monday or every morning or every New Year's. You're done feeling like a hypocrite between what you believe and what you eat. You're just relaxed. When you realize it's not really you or a problem you've got, it's just also knowing that it's the same process no matter what new goal or what new lifestyle you want to take on that's important to you. So how do you get there? Well, it starts with answering a question that you tend to use against yourself. People say, well, how can I want this so badly? How can I believe this is the right thing to do and still keep making the wrong choices, the old choices, the past choices? Well, answer that question. How can it be that you want something, you know what you want to do, and you still keep making the old choices? A good visual is to imagine your consciousness like an iceberg. Your conscious mind, the logical, rational part of your mind, that's where your willpower lives. It's the part that watched the documentary, that read the book, that knows what it believes, that makes the plan, but it's only about 10% of the iceberg. 90% of the iceberg is lumbering through the ocean, your subconscious mind. It's running most of your habitual thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. It's not logical and it's not very visible. It doesn't care about the documentary you watched. It doesn't care what your doctor said. It doesn't care about the news article you just read about hog farms. It just runs its programs. So when the part of your iceberg at the top comes up with this great idea with all the good reasons in the world, we're going plant-based, the 90% of the iceberg, your subconscious, below the water, just keeps floating along, doing things the way it's always done, the way it already knows how to do, and already has good feelings about, and already feels comfortable. A metaphor I once heard about this was, well, you know how to write. You know how to make all your letters. You know how to write sentences. And you're completely fluent at writing. And you can do it without thinking at all. But you can, most of us, I'd love to talk to the ones who argue with this one, but most of us can only do those things with one hand. It's the hand you've programmed over 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. The other hand has all the same knowledge, but it has no program. So it's awkward, right? Almost impossible. And that's the whole difference. Not your knowledge, it's the programming, it's the practice. Knowing is not doing. That's why you can know everything about why and how to eat plant-based and still not be able to do it consistently. But the good news is, you weren't born writing, you started and you kept doing it. You weren't born craving baked goods, muffins with butter and eggs in them. You weren't born craving bacon. At some point you started and you repeated it and the path got a little deeper and it was done with family that you cared about and friends and in celebrations, and suddenly it's no longer a choice anymore. It's just automatic. It's normal. It became the program. And that's how every program in us got installed, not by deciding, by repeating. Periodically, I'm reminded that it's good for my aging brain if I brush my teeth with my left hand, since I'm right-handed. And I still end up not doing it because it's so exponentially much easier to do with my right hand because it's second nature. It's unconscious, that deeply installed program with my right hand. It's not only practiced mentally, it's been practiced physically, so it keeps winning. But any program built by repetition can be rewritten the same way, but fighting it is not the strategy. It takes a little time and awareness to train it. And you stop using willpower to force it, and you start using your awareness to guide your programming, guide your behaviors down a new path until it seems normal, until it seems like that's where we want to go on without any effort. And this works on food, this works on the cheese habit, this works on that idea that a meal isn't a meal without meat or some kind of animal protein in the middle of the plate. It works on your mindless grazing on old snacks, reaching for comfort foods when you're stressed or bored. It works on all of that. And every one of those is just a program that's been running. And every one of those can be replaced with other programs, hopefully better ones, ones that you want to install. Like reaching naturally for greens, beans, veggies, fruits, seeds, and nuts, feeling satisfied when you look at a plant-based plate, feeling calm and confident when you walk into, whether it's a restaurant or a family dinner, even when there's not that much that seems vegan there. And of course, the old programs took many years to build through thousands of repetitions, but maybe like me, you were in your 50s, maybe, before you started to think you wanted to change this part of your life. Maybe you're in your 60s or 70s or 80s. So how do you install new ones? It's not too late. And I think one proof of our neuroplasticity is this famous study from the 60s. They took a group of college students and split them into 3 groups. The first group practiced basketball free throws 20 minutes a day, actually throwing the ball. A second group didn't touch the ball, but they imagined specifically making free throws for 20 minutes a day. And a third group did nothing. And after 20 days, the group that did nothing didn't improve. Shocker, right? The group that practiced for real improved about 24%. The group that only imagined throwing the ball improved a little less than the 24%. I think I wrote down it was 23%, but almost as much as the ones who had physically practiced. They got better without ever picking up a ball. Repetition in the mind will help install programs in your mind. Doing something over and over in real life, that's how a lot of our current habits got installed. But that mental rehearsal is important too. A vividly imagined action counts almost as much as a real one. That means if you can rehearse the programs of a plant-based person, you can install them so much faster. So is it the only way you can move in a plant-based direction? No, of course not. But it's a great reminder of how plastic your brain is, how you can work with your brain instead of against it. And just because you haven't done it for decades, it's not a problem. You know, in my coaching, we notice what works well, whether it's our plant-based journey, our vegan journey, or any other part of what we're trying to do. But we notice what works well, and then we celebrate it, and we notice it. We notice that we did it. We make sure that we did. We also notice what didn't go well, very dispassionately. No drama. What didn't go so well in our vegan practice, for example? And we don't make it mean anything about us. But we do use it to practice some other options mentally, to rehearse some different possibilities, to brainstorm what might have been at least a tiny bit more in line with our goals. We notice where the old conditioning, the old programming was running us, and we take that awareness to look for what we could have done that would be a little closer to what we wanted. That's installing a tiny part of a new program. Maybe you look back on your day and you find one moment where you didn't show up the way you wanted to around a plant-based diet. Maybe you reached for something, cheese. I think I talked about it a couple weeks ago on the podcast. I had a client who kept grabbing cheese on a charcuterie board at a bridge group, and she would notice afterwards. Maybe it just seemed normal. There was cheese everywhere. Everybody else was eating it, and she just grabbed it, and she didn't want to grab it. So you look at that moment when you wish you would have handled it slightly differently, but this time as a calm, grounded version of yourself, not someone who's, surrounded by other people who are doing something differently, but just who you would like to be. You relax yourself, you take deep breaths, and you imagine yourself handling that moment a little bit differently. And you feel yourself, experience yourself making the plant-based choice. Maybe it's going, oh, I don't eat that anymore. Or maybe it's pulling out what you did bring that is vegan. And you feel ease about it. You feel comfortable about it. You feel it and you see it, and then you let it go. A few seconds. It's a redo. Like sometimes we have a lot of small grandchildren, and sometimes the moms will say when something has been grabbed or pushed or something went away we don't necessarily want to encourage, the kids get a redo. What did you wish you had just done? What did you wish you had said? What would you have said differently? How would you treat your cousin differently? What would you say please or thank you? Would you I mean, there's so many examples I could give you right now that I'm struggling. But anyway, you give the kids a chance to take a breath and then redo the moment. In a few seconds, you or a toddler can take a moment that was running on an old program, an old instinctual push and shove program, and you can give your mind a new one to run instead. A little bit of reprogramming. And the other half of it is the rehearsal. Your redo is taking the past and trying to rewrite it, install it a little differently. The rehearsal installs the future. Rehearsals we do a lot of in coaching ahead of time, being the person who already lives plant-based, who's already dealing with a vegan issue. So your mind starts running that program ahead of time. You imagine waking yourself up tomorrow as someone who's been comfortably, happily plant-based for many years before you even open your eyes. And you can notice how that feels. The clarity, the ease of knowing exactly what you decided and what you want and how you eat. Or maybe you are rehearsing how you're going to ask for some assistance from someone if you're traveling or in a hotel or at a work luncheon where the only choices you've been offered are fish, chicken, beef. And you notice that, oh, in that case, I wouldn't be worried about asking for a vegan option. I will just ask simply for it. Might not work, but in that case, I'll deal with that when I come to it. It's not a big deal. You know already you eat some things differently from your family or spouse or coworkers. Maybe it's because of a health issue. Maybe it's a preference issue. It's no big deal. We rehearse your hands just reaching for fruit or oats or foods that are just your foods now. And we imagine moving through the day, lunch happening easily, old foods coming up at work or on a menu. And in advance, we notice they just don't worry us. They're not forbidden. It's not that you have to make a big effort. They're just not yours. And you can imagine the people you interact with and notice how you just show up. You're clear. You're unapologetic and comfortable. There are no lectures. You're not defensive. You're just someone who's doing what she does, completely at peace with how you eat. Or maybe you pick one moment tomorrow that you already are anticipating might be a little bit challenging. Maybe it's a restaurant or a family member, or maybe you know you're going to be exhausted and stressed out, and you just slow it down. And you watch yourself handling it, and you feel calm and in control, and you make a choice you want without a lot of effort. And we connect to that feeling, and that's it. That's the rehearsal. 60 seconds maybe. 2 minutes tops. You were the person who lives plant-based. And to your subconscious, that is basically real. To that 90% of the iceberg floating down below, that's the future installing in that part of your subconscious. And the more that you do that in real life and also in your mind, the deeper it gets and it becomes your new programming. So the great news about coaching is that in just seconds or minutes or weekly or with check-ins more often, you can do that redo, that rehearsal, anytime you think of it. Because if you do, you're going to start feeling something start to shift. Something starts to feel more possible just because you're repeating it. Because if you do this, you're going to feel capable. Something will start to shift week by week. Living plant-based, for example, if that's what you're trying to do, it stops being something you're efforting at. It stops becoming something you're working so hard at or struggling with. And it just becomes kind of who you are. And that's why I have thought for many years that coaching is the most effective way I've ever seen to get traction on any goal. Because the biggest thing standing between you and being vegan or living a plant-based practice, it's just your belief in yourself. And if you're wondering, can this work for me? I mean, that's the question. Can it? I'm always happy to talk to any of you for free to see if coaching is a good fit for you, no matter what area you're looking to create a new program in, no matter what area you're looking to change. But I think for today, this is plenty. I believe so many of you, just from this episode, will have you've increased your recognition just from this podcast of old programming that's been running in your lives that you've been calling, I think erroneously, you've been calling it lack of discipline or lack of time or lack of support, or just decided that whole goal is going to be impossible for you. But maybe just the awareness that the thought you have at the top of the iceberg is nowhere near as powerful as that 90% of the iceberg that's invisible under the surface. Just awareness of that will give you an energetic boost. Maybe just knowing your brain is so powerful that if you keep repeating and practicing those little redos, meaning redoing the part of your new plan that didn't go that well earlier, and then practice rehearsing for future tricky moments, even just a few minutes, you are reinstalling you're installing a new program to support whatever goal you want. And certainly I know it works on a plant-based journey. If your brain's anything like mine, it can be a challenge. It can be a challenge. But doesn't it help to know how to work with your brain, not against it? So anytime you find yourself pushing, efforting, pushing those goals uphill and then having them roll back and feeling defeated about it, or if you're getting frustrated watching someone else you care about struggling, send them this episode, please. And if you have questions for me anytime, please reach out. Get on the mailing list or DM me on Instagram, or you can find all the contact details in the episode's show notes about my website, which is vegan@anyage.com, vegan@anyage.com. And I'm always delighted to talk. And until then, it's time to enjoy being your own programmer, kids, and veg your best.
Veg Your Best podcast production, music, and editing by Charlie Weinshank. Thanks, Charlie. Before you go, it would mean so much to me and the Veg Your Best team if you would hit subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, or share with someone you think might be interested. Something about algorithms, it helps bump us up a little in the rankings, and that's the best way to help others find the podcast and for us to find our audience. So, until next week, make it easy and veg your best.